Hi, and welcome to the show. Today is Recovery Wednesday, December the 7th, 2016. And our calling number is 563-999-3581. Press 1, and that puts you in queue to talk to us. And we would love to hear your comments and your questions because that truly makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everyone. We're honored that you're here with us today. Get to talk about this process of recovering the truth of who we are. If you hold a newborn child, you'll get a direct experience of this awesome active presence of love that each of us started out as. And if you've lost that, then we're here to support you in recovering that, the whole idea of Recovery Wednesday. Oftentimes, recovery is looked at as recovering from a disease. We're not interested. What we're interested in is recovering the wholeness of being. And when you hold a newborn child, you get an experience of what a human being is. And each one of us, every one of us, no one cut out from the cycle started out exactly the same way. Now, the culture tells us all kinds of different stories and lies, but we're not here to engage in the lie. We're here to tell the truth. You know, there's an interesting word in the Aramaic language that has been translated and interpreted, I should say probably more properly, interpreted in the most insane ways in this culture. In fact, the culture invites people to take on the interpretation of this word as an identity, claim that as an identity, and forget who they are. So if you go back to the ancient scriptures, especially in the Aramaic, you hear humans being told that we were made in the image and likeness of the Creator. And we're told that the Creator is love. So our true identity, if you hold a newborn, you know exactly what that is. Our true identity is that of love. And yet there's a word that's used, it's an archery term actually. If you were on the archery range and you fired at the target and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell, sin. And all that would be meant by that word would be, you're off the mark. Now, when we go off the mark, we put energies into our structure, and our structure ends up in pain. Most people who are in pain, oftentimes living generations and generations of pain, have no idea the pain is even there. Now, you say, wait a minute, Michael, how could you have pain you didn't know was there? Well, let's use an example. Have you ever put on a wool sweater and it's itchy, right? For 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, the itch is gone, isn't it? Or is the itch gone? The awareness of the itch is gone. The mind has adjusted it out of awareness. But remember, 8 hours later when you took that wool sweater off, you scratched and felt so good to be rid of the sweater. The itch that was there was not experienced because the mind will only tolerate something that's out of balance with harmony, will only tolerate awareness of it for a certain amount of time before it shuts it down. So people engage in all kinds of experiences that cause pain and then hide the pain from themselves. And then the tendency is, somewhere along the line, someone introduces them to an anesthetic, and that anesthetic, when engaged in sufficiently, creates a lack of awareness of the pain. It takes away the awareness of the pain, anesthetizes it. And so doing, people experience that anesthetic, even though it's a toxic substance, as something good. And so one tends to become addicted to that substance in order to keep the pain they didn't know they had hidden and anesthetized. Well, what we're here to do is to give people the tools with which to uncover their pain, remove their pain, and therefore remove the need for an anesthetic and return to the state of being as we're designed to function. So human life is this awesome presence of love. We're here to support you in experiencing that. And I'd love to say hello to Dr. Tim and see how the young man is today.
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Blessedly busy. We had our support group last night and had somebody do a great example of a worksheet. She had a very powerful emotional event go on, and she was holding a goal for somebody to be there for her and truly care about her. And when she did the release and went to cancel it, as we do on a regular basis, and this is somebody who's quite experienced with this.
Right.
She took a breath or two, and then she just said, you know what, I can't let it go. I just can't let it go. I can't get a shift. And I said, all right, well, then take a breath and just realize that right now there's a part of you that's not willing to cancel it. And just write in 6A, now I feel, well, I'm feeling what? Kind of stuck. Okay, write that. And then write any thoughts you have about what would be the negative consequence for actually canceling the goal and letting it move on. So it was very instructive, very powerful, and people got to ask some questions about that process. And I think it's a really good demonstration for us that not every worksheet ends up blowing our socks off and creating, powerful, dramatic shifts with conscious awareness of a new insight. And yet she clearly felt differently after the process. She didn't, she was still feeling stuck, and she was still feeling hurt by this other person's choice. Well, her reactions to this other person's choice, and the outside events hadn't changed, and she was holding on to her goal, and so she was still generating that anger inside of her. And so it was very instructive, and it led to lots of good questions. And so that's my offering. We had 7 people in the group plus me, and just a lovely evening of people learning the tools, applying the tools, and sharing the love involved with supporting each other in healing.
Powerful. And that opens the occasion to have a little bit of conversation about this silly thing of wanting something that's very reasonable to want, and then having someone like you or me say, well, why don't you just cancel your need for that? And it's like, come on, don't be so ridiculous. All I wanted was that person to be there for me. Why would I cancel my need for that? That's a perfectly healthy, logical, reasonable, rational goal. And I say, I agree with you 2,000%. That is a very good goal. But when we invite people to cancel a goal, we're not inviting people to cancel a goal because there's something wrong with the goal. There's no problem with that goal whatsoever. In a given circumstance, anyone on the planet would be reasonable, expecting that someone should be there for them in a situation where they need support. That's, totally reasonable. And so the question becomes, well, then, why am I being asked to cancel this goal? Well, the problem is not the goal. The problem is that the goal is a recruiter. The goal is a driver. There's some interesting Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. Just the tiniest fragment comes into awareness, and as you are often saying on the show, Tim, that you have a choice as to where you put your attention. And if you put your attention on what the goal recruits in the way of pain or trauma that's internally generated, then you can stay focused in that pain or trauma, or you can change the focus of your mind by canceling the goal and collapsing the perceptual construct based in pain or trauma. Now, again, it's a wonderful goal. Gee, I just want somebody to be there for me and take care of me, cherish me, support me, nurture me, be there for me. But when someone says, and when they didn't do that, I just went into such a rage. What they just told me is that in their file in their minds on being cherished and nurtured and taken care of, there's rage. And so when they load the goal to be cherished and nurtured and taken care of, what it recruits from the mind is rage. And of course, that rage is an aberrant energy, doesn't belong in that file, doesn't belong in the mind, doesn't belong in the body. And the benefit, the huge and amazing benefit of canceling the goal to be, in that case, cherished, taken care of, nurtured, is that the construct that comes out of that goal, the 9 bits of data that leaves 9,991 bits hiding, is that it uncovers the hidden material. And I get to collapse into that underlying energy that causes the pain and the trauma. So the beauty of canceling the goal is that I get to see what's underneath it, and instead of being in an indirect relationship with the pain, and what I mean by an indirect relationship with the pain is that if I load the goal for Charlie to be there for me, and I go into pain when Charlie says, no, I'm not going to fulfill your goal at all, then what I've done is I've loaded a goal in my mind that recruits pain from the underlying part of my mind, the hidden part of my mind, around not being taken care of or nurtured or supported, cherished. And that part of the mind most people keep hidden, and when they load a goal to be cherished and someone isn't there for them, then that hidden rage or pain about not being cherished is not confronted directly, but is the data that's used to produce my brain's image of Charlie. So Charlie shows up in my mind as causing me all kinds of rage. And I say, look at that darn Charlie and what he's done to me. But of course, sooner or later I've got to own that I'm the one who's feeling this rage. Gee, maybe it's in my physiology, because if it's in Charlie's physiology, I sure can't feel his rage. And so I'm in an indirect relationship with my own source of pain when I'm putting it into my brain's image of someone else by demanding they do something and they refuse to fulfill my goal. By canceling the goal, I construct the projection that my pain and my rage is about Charlie, and I get to drop directly into it. So now I enter into direct relationship with the hidden part of my mind where this rage is stored. And the rage may be something from me as a 3-year-old. It may be something in my genes that goes back 10 generations in my bloodline. It really doesn't matter. But this genius Yeshua 2,000 years ago that gave us this tool and this understanding of how to access that hidden dissociated content directly, because it's only when it's directly confronted, when we come into direct relationship with it. I really enjoyed the conversation yesterday, Tim. We were talking about the trauma resolution and how someone has to directly confront, like it's in real time, like it's real now, this trauma. And when they can access that, instead of keeping it in hiding, that's the time when it can be changed, because there's direct access instead of being indirectly accessing it, and I'm just feeling the impact of it moving rather than directly confronting it. So it's to me, it's a wonderful piece to understand, and took me 3 decades to get to where I could understand it, and working with the Aramaic forgiveness process, better than 3 decades, to get to I could go, that's why you do that silly thing of canceling goal. Okay, now I got it. Thank you, Ruka. So if you're ever in a space where you don't want to cancel a goal, and here's the beauty of it, you can go right back when you finish the worksheet or the wake-up sheet, and you can reestablish that goal. I still want Charlie to cherish and honor me, be there for me. I can go back and reestablish the goal, but I temporarily cancel it, at least temporarily, because I'm freed of the underlying dynamic when I confront it through love. And the goal is always something less than what we really want. And ultimately, the ultimate goal of everyone, my take is, the ultimate, and I shouldn't even say it's not necessarily even a goal, the ultimate purpose is to return to the truth of who we are as the experience of a human being, recovering the truth of who we are. And it is the trauma that covers that up that needs to be confronted and removed. There's the only other place on the planet that I found the exact and specific definition of forgiveness is in the Course in Miracles. And in Course in Miracles, here's what they say. Let go all the things you think you want, your trifling treasure put away, and leave a clean and open space within your mind for love to come. So the goal for Charlie to be there for me, nurture me, is, in the Course's terms, a trifling treasure. Would it be a nice thing to have for him to be there for me? Yes. But compared to experiencing myself as this presence of love physiologically in my own body, that's nothing. It's a trifling treasure. So the Course suggests whenever you're in upset, you let go all the things you think you want. You look at the goal that's driving the pain, you cancel your need for it, and that collapses the end result projection, and you get there directly, firsthand, as you talked about yesterday, Tim, and bringing the presence of love, you begin to dissolve that which underlies it. And I'll never forget when I first started to gather the insight that was what was happening. I don't remember exactly when it was now, but I can remember going, oh my God, look at that. This thing that this person's been dancing around and has not wanted to touch their whole lives long, all of a sudden, in the presence of love, they were able to touch it. And being able to touch it with the presence of love, they were able to heal it. Man, that's so much better than arranging your life. You know, a lot of, I think, so-called therapy is giving people tools so they can avoid those things. If you look at drug therapy, for instance, and it's a kind of an oxymoron, if someone has pain, you give them something so they can't feel it. And if they can't feel it, then they can't heal it. It's pretty silly. But that's, of course, where there's a lot of money to be made. So it's become a form of so-called therapy, but it's actually quite the opposite of therapy would be my take. So recovering the truth of who we are means that ultimately we have to face what underlies our pain and trauma, remove the self, forgive the self based in pain and trauma, and then the only thing left is who we are. Then if I choose to go back and say, Charlie, I'd still really like for you to be there for me. And if Charlie refuses to fulfill my goal, I'll go, oh, well, Charlie refused to fulfill my goal. I won't be experiencing all that unconscious pain and trauma. I'll recover the truth of who I am and be able to go, oh, okay, Charlie, that's your choice. All right, I can still hold the space for you, though you're not there to hold the space for me. By the way, can I support you in a worksheet? Because it looks like you got some trauma going on, and that's why you're choosing not to be there for me. How can I support you? So the whole game gets turned around. Does that fit for you, Dr. Tim, and any thoughts on that?
Well, just that if you had been in the group last night, you would have heard Yam say almost verbatim, big chunks of what you just said, that the goal of this work is fill in Michael Ryce. And he was using an example of a friend of his after he'd come home from Vietnam and he bought this big stereo, and his friend snuck into his house when he wasn't there and stole his stereo. And so he was using how his example was at the time he had all of this trauma that he created in his mind about how horrible his friend was, etc. And now that he had Yeshua teaching these tools, and the point of forgiveness in that work is to dismantle the false perceptions I have held about someone else. So, in the work in Course in Miracles and Way of Mastery, forgiveness has nothing to do with letting somebody else off the hook for what they did or didn't do that you wanted them to do. It has to do with, here's a quote from the book, it says, to forgive means to choose to release another from the perceptions you have been projecting upon them. So it's got nothing to do with, I'm right, you're wrong, and then I'm just going to let you off the hook. It has to do with dismantling my false perceptions. How do I know they're false? They leave me feeling anything but love. They leave me feeling anger and fear and sadness and pain and guilt and shame. So if I dismantle those, then it opens the space for compassion. So It's amazingly wonderful how it's the very same message offered from two slightly different perspectives, and I'm glad to be on the team.
Well, I hear that one loud and clear, and I'm with you 100% for sure. It's pretty awesome to have access to that. And I'm going to ask everybody in the community, if you would, to just join me in holding a space. We were talking to a family in Texas this morning who has a daughter that at the age of 16 went through a pretty traumatic event. And as a result of that assault to her system, mentally, emotionally, she ended up moving into some pretty severe disease processes and has been really deeply, deeply suffering for the last 5 years, and to the point of almost suicide. And so I'm just going to ask everyone to hold a space, if you would, for this young lady. And we know that the impact of those who are practiced in holding an active space of love and directing the energy to a particular individual. And at this point, I don't have the family's permission to mention her name, so I won't be doing that. But you'll tap in and know who it is just by holding the space for this young lady. And Jeannie and I will hold her in awareness and just see her being able to soften this trauma that was so deep for her. And if she needs to become aware of perhaps other underlying traumas, at this point it looks like that was the major assault, but who knows what all the other factors are. But if you just see this young lady just being able to soften and let go of this trauma and allow herself to process through that original assault, whether it was the one that happened 5 years ago or maybe it's something genetic, who knows, but a very, from what I'm told, I haven't met her yet. It looks like we may fly down to Austin in a couple of weeks and visit her and breathe her and see if we can be of some support. But in the meantime, to just hold a space. And from what I've been told, a very beautiful young girl who's just been suffering deeply, deeply, like physically, mentally, emotionally, in the extreme. So everybody just hold a space, just tap into that. Do that love exchange that we do, and through Jeannie and I's energy, we'll send it to this young lady and to her family, because her parents are both really going through so much. I can only imagine. Well, I can't really imagine, thank goodness, but I can sort of start to think about how watching your daughter go through a major traumatic event and then watching what was a beautiful budding in life really turned to nothing but trauma. So we hold a space of love and perfection in her process, and her being now able to start to withdraw from that traumatic process to open, to understand how to let loose of the trauma energies, let loose of the dis-ease processes happening within her structure, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and return to vibrant health as the beautiful young lady that she's designed to be. She's now 21 and has her whole life ahead of her, and so we're just holding a vision for her to be returned to that fullness of life, and at the same time for anyone, anywhere on the planet who is in that space where not understanding have allowed a trauma to compromise their immune systems, their physiology, their minds, that we together bring a new flush of the active presence of love into the planet in support of those who are in need of that support. And the fact that we're getting closer and closer day by day to critical mass. We're here in the Villages, Fruitland Park, Unity in Florida, and we just got this fabulous group of people. Two people who started doing this work about 20 years ago and kind of, worked with it for years and sort of set it aside, and then reconnected, called us back a few months ago and said, hey, we've got another issue to deal with. We're lost in it. And as a result of our conversation with them, we were invited to come to Unity in Fruitland Park, and we're doing a series here, and just a really sweet group of people who are really getting the understanding, getting the information. Looks like there's going to be probably a pretty powerful MindShifter support group start, so we just hold the space for it all, and I think we're getting close to that critical mass. You know, this physicist 2,000 years ago who said, a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, I guarantee, was not talking about bread. He was talking about humanity, and as each of us is able to truly incarnate as the active presence of love in this physiological system, we are empowered to do something much different than what the world has been doing, and to create a different process than the one that has most people captured. And getting to that critical mass state, I think, is just so important right now with the things going on in our world. So thank you, everyone, for that support. And any other thoughts for you, Tim?
No, I'm just sending love.
Thank you. I join with you in doing that. So let's check with Jeannie and see if Gail is on the line today. Are you with us, young lady?
Well, let me find her number and see if she is. She's not got her hand up. I believe this is her.
Put a hand up if
Gail?
you do, Gail. Push 1.
There she is.
Gail is one of our Recovery Wednesday co-authors of the day and co-anchors for the process. Has really brought us a lot of amazing insight from I'm always amazed, Gail, at the depth of work that you've done through the 12-step programs and how knowledgeable you are in that regard, and I'm so delighted to have that knowledge from that particular program available to our audience. So thanks for being here, and what's on your mind today?
You're most definitely welcome. From the moment that I listened to the show 2 years ago, I wanted to be able to contribute and didn't know how I was going to be able to do so, and so it is an honor and a privilege to be able to contribute every Wednesday and correlate the two spiritual modalities. It's awesome. It's an honor.
Fabulous. So what's on your mind? Anything in particular in regard to the 12-step program that is on your mind today to share with us?
Well, first and foremost, I want to add to the energy that is directed to this 21-year-old that experienced trauma at the age of 16, because I most definitely experienced a trauma at the age of 16 that affected my whole life and still does. There was something that happened to me. I got my first little job at a fast food restaurant and was assaulted by a manager, and it affects me to the degree today. I just turned 50 in November. That sometimes I can't get in the shower. It also affects me to the degree of I have trepidation in getting into a pool or being in a swimsuit. It's also affected my active addiction to alcohol and drugs. And also it's affected my relationships. It's affected my finances, and that it's also affected my very, very, well, not so active now, but I have a very active food addiction, and so it's affected my whole life. And to have that type of trauma being addressed at the age of 21, it sounds like by supportive parents that have gotten in contact with you, to nip that at the age of 21, to have the I didn't have parental support. My behavior automatically changed, and I turned into the scapegoat and was, gossiped and criticized, and nobody took me to counseling, nobody got me help, and so for that to be able to change like that and to have that kind of parental and family support is amazing.
It is amazing that the parents of this young lady are so conscious and have really worked with her for the last 5 years. They've actually taken her to the Mayo Clinic twice, and in order to do that, she was physically so sensitive and traumatized that they had to hire a private jet to take her there. She couldn't enter into a commercial airport. So really debilitating impact on her life. And so we're getting ready to hand her the tool of forgiveness, to do some still point breathing and share, of course, all of the above to support her and able to empower her to come back to her energy field as the original created being that she is, and to function and have the kind of life that a beautiful 21-year-old girl is designed to have. So we'll just hold the space for her, and we hold the space for you, having gone through that kind of an event, and the skills that one acquires in dealing with that. Of course, you can always make hay with it, which you've done so beautifully, and working with people, starting MindShifter support groups, a couple of them, and working with other people. It's certainly powerful inspiration to see how you've taken those challenges and taken the next level of your skill set to sharing it with others. And of course, it is wonderful that we teach best that which we most need to learn, isn't it? That the skill set keeps growing.
It is so true.
Yeah, it is awesome.
It is so true. Yeah, I read that book too. That quote came from Richard Bach
right.
in the 80s. So I so appreciate the fact that you quote that phrase, because it's so true. Once again, I'm going through over the river and through the woods to go help some people that live, some beautiful women that live in this recovery home, and I may get disconnected from you going down this hill, and I'll call back in. But what I wanted to report today is that I had a beautiful Christmas party. It's the first time I had a Christmas party for the women that I sponsor. We had this Christmas party on Friday, and we had a potluck, and then we had a dirty grab bag, coffee mug exchange. That was a lot of fun. And then I had asked Julie Haverstick for that story about the candle that was lit by the Dalai Lama, and he lit the candle of a gentleman named Chris who had leukemia for 3 years. And this happened in the 90s, I think 1997. I think the goal was to have millions candles by January 1st of 2000 to be lit all over the world. And so, of course, from the Dalai Lama to this gentleman named Chris was a lady named Jenny that worked with Julie Haverstick. So Jenny's candle was lit by Chris, and then Julie Haverstick's candle was lit by Jenny, who was a fellow teacher in Dayton, Ohio. And then, of course, Julie lit my candle and lit the other people that were in Laws of Living. And then I lit these ladies' candles. And to be able to read that story and hold that moment of silence for world peace and for gratitude. And there was 5 women that weren't in attendance that I sponsor, and hold the space for them and other alcoholics and addicts that are still suffering was very powerful. And I'm grateful to have learned that story and learned that ceremony and to have that candle to light other candles.
Awesome. Well, we certainly are here holding the space and doing the work to produce the result of a world that functions out of the pure presence of love and being, as opposed to the unresolved dramas and traumas of the generations. So it's definitely an idea whose time has come.
Absolutely. And there was one lady that wasn't in attendance, and I had made the assumption that she had relapsed, and that was not the case for her. She had her house broken into, and a gentleman, well, I use that word loosely, had broken into her house that she had been in relationship with, and knew that she was receiving her check, and wanted her to go to the bank and withdraw funds for him so he could use. And he beat her up pretty brutally. I don't have her permission either to, mention her name. But if people hold the space for her as well, I mean, she was in the hospital for 24 hours. I'm receiving treatment for the injuries that she had sustained. I was able to, me and Scott, my boyfriend, were able to get her on Sunday, and I did some Reiki on her, and she had a huge breakthrough during the Reiki session on some past trauma that she had experienced. That is, once again, I don't have her permission to give details. So
sure, of course.
It was a huge breakthrough, and then I asked Scott later in the evening, I go, do you want to do wake-up sheets or do you want to do breathing? And he said, I want to breathe, which is amazing. He doesn't like to breathe because his throat gets really dry, and it reminds him when he had a car accident when he was 17, having the feeding tube and all the ventilator tubes down his throat. And so,
right.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to breathe you first so this other lady could get an idea what this is about. And so I breathed him, and he usually doesn't stay down any longer than 20 minutes, and he very rarely has still points. And this time, he had a stroke when he had this accident. He had a stroke on the right, which affected his side of his body. And the left side of his body is very atrophied, and he has difficulty walking sometimes. He always trips. And so he had a huge release around the left side of his body during the session, this breath work.
Awesome.
He stayed down. Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. And the other lady, not really.
You're starting to cut out a little bit. We lost those last words, Gail.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was amazing.
You're back.
She was holding the space.
Well, one of the things you might focus on, because the trauma from the feeding tube literally is an energy being held by the tissue in the throat. And so you might, the next time you breathe him, invite him to focus. And what I found is a thing we call body breathing, where if the trauma is in the throat, then I'd imagine that I'm actually breathing in through, not through my mouth, but through the tissue in the throat, allow the energy to come through there and literally remove the trauma energy from the tissue so that he can be freed of that and feel comfortable breathing more easily. So, but that's awesome that he's opened up on that to that level. That's just, that's the progression of one doing their work step by step. I love the scriptural thing that says strength to strength, here a little, there a little. We get to move forward.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that he had an audience, was a part of it too. Or maybe, there was two people holding the space for them. Maybe that is what made the difference. But yeah, he was able to release a lot of energy, and that was great to be a part of. And then we breathed her. He held the space for her, and I breathed her. And I didn't do as many of the energy points on her. Really focused more on the head and neck, and
right.
helping her release those energies. And she did have some visions. I think she went into still point one. And she did have some visions of an institution, of lying down and then seeing this light, like maybe a surgical light in an operating room, or maybe a light in a gymnasium. And then she was seeing these glass doors, the kind of glass doors that have those zigzags in them. And so we were trying to determine, if it was a school or what this area was. But anyway, she released more energy during that session as well. And it was an honor and a privilege to be able to help her through the trauma that she experienced earlier in the week, and then, to dive down into how she's creating this repeated trauma with men being beat and stuff like that.
Sweet. Awesome.
Yeah, it was very sweet. And this particular particular woman, she married a man from Jordan, and he's Muslim, and in order to be joined in marriage with him, she converted, and I learned more about the purity of that religion, and the fact that they do revere Jesus/Yeshua, and they call him Nisa. And
he's actually mentioned more often in the Quran than Muhammad is.
And I asked her about that, and she said it's true. And I said, what is his name in that language? And she said Nisa. And they call him prophet, or they call him the last prophet, Isa. The purity of, she knows the Quran words backwards, sideways, and she established the mosque in what we call the Metro East, and was the principal of the Sunday school. And so she knows a lot more about the Muslim religion than she does about the Christianity. She was raised Catholic, and she really enjoys the 12 steps, and that she could start all over and start to form her own relationship with God, because she's not sure she wants to hold on to Islam. And she's not sure that she necessarily wants to go Christian, but she knows that through the 12 steps that she can form her own relationship with God. She could form her own conception of God. And that's a beautiful thing as well. But I'm learning so much from her by asking her questions about the Muslim religion. And my thinking, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are, is that I think Christians or the radical Christians that are wanting to persecute the Muslims are afraid of the truth. Do you think is that your perception? Because the truth that I hear through what she is teaching me, it feels very pure, and it feels very true. So what are your thoughts?
Well, anyone that wants to persecute anybody is off base, is out of alignment. And I don't care how deep the reason is. It seems so reasonable that I should persecute you because you, and of course the bottom line is always, you didn't fulfill one of the goals I have for you. And so the person who would want to persecute another because they haven't fulfilled a goal that individual holding the persecution wants to do, then by canceling that goal, they'll get to heal the hostility in them that would lead to persecuting. And so, it's just, it's the non-human mind playing out its games in 1,000 variations. When we understand the principles behind it, then we can put an end to the discussion about who did this and who did that. And are you functioning as love? That's all. It's that simple. Are you functioning as love? If you're not, then there's work to be done. That's all. And so that's what we're here to hold the space for, whether it's in, of course, there are many Muslims that want to persecute Christians or so-called Muslims. I doubt that they are actual Muslims. They call themselves that. There are many so-called Christians who want to persecute others, and they're not Christians either, because Yeshua would not tolerate an instant of persecution. And so that's all false religion would be my offering. Let's get back to functioning as human beings. The truth is, we are the presence of love. Let's live there. Understand how the energy system works, work within it, and carry on.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'm complete, especially if there's other people that are on the line.
Okay, young lady, appreciate you. Appreciate your contribution every Wednesday, that you're here to be an anchor with us and carry the work forward.
Absolutely. Delighted as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's check in with Jeannie, see if there's anything happening in the chat room or anybody with a hand up in the phone queue. Jeannie?
There had been a hand up, but it has disappeared, and everybody in the chat room is guests, so they can't write. They can just listen. So if whoever had their hand up a moment ago, if you're still on the line, press 1. That puts you back in queue. We have 13 minutes. We've got time to go over another question.
And if you're in the chat room, there's a really simple procedure for signing into Blog Talk, and they're very protective. You know, they don't allow your email address to be abused or share it with anybody else. So they're pretty protective of it, and so it's safe to do that. And by doing so, you can write questions and participate in the conversation in the chat room. So if you're there, and or if you are there and you have a question for us but can't write in, then you might want to call the call-in number, which Jeannie has right there in front of her, and I don't. So
I do.
Hope to turn it to Jeannie to share it with us.
I do have it. It's 563-999-3581. And we do have a hand up. I think it might be Roma, 808. You're on the air.
Hi. Yes, it is.
Great. Hey there, young lady. Welcome.
Yeah, thank
Aloha.
you. Oh, aloha. Oh, my, yes. Yes, I wanted to make a comment regarding something that Dr. Tim had said earlier about a person not willing to let go of the trauma. And I remember a moment in my...
Actually, hold on a second. Actually, it wasn't that she wasn't willing to let go of the trauma. I suspect that if Peter said, are you willing to let go of this trauma, she'd have been the first one to say yes. But what it was she wasn't willing to cancel the goal so that she would access the trauma. That was my understanding. It was the goal. You know, she'd identified the goal that she had and really wasn't willing to cancel that. That's a little different from letting go of the trauma.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, but it was a goal for a particular person in her life, was it not?
Right, correct.
For someone, yeah. Well, I had something similar a long time ago regarding my father, who I lost him when I was 5, and then he killed himself when I was 27. So I was doing a worksheet on him one day, and I realized that the only thing I had left of my father was the pain, and I didn't want to release the goal for that reason.
I hear you.
Of course, yeah. It was an interesting aha moment. So if it happened to me, maybe it happens to other people too.
So have you worked through that one? Have you gone in and let go of that pain? Yeah. Good.
Oh, I feel like I have, yeah. I mean, good. I think wherever we focus our mind, we're going to re-experience the pain. I was telling somebody yesterday that, when I lost my baby, if I processed the loss of my baby, but if I think about it, I will feel the pain again. It depends on where we focus our mind, what we're thinking on, and the pain, you can heal something, but that doesn't mean that the pain that was there at the time, at the event, didn't exist, because it did exist. But we can heal ourselves from being stuck in it, can't we?
Well, two perspectives. Yes, we can heal ourselves from being stuck in it, but we can come to the point where, remember, pain is just an energy held in the system. And when it is exposed to the active presence of love, that pain dissolves, dissipates, disappears, and is gone. If I think about an event and I still have pain around it, I have more work to do in that arena. When they said to Yeshua, how many of these worksheets do we have to do? Is 7 enough? In Aramaic, he said 77 times 70. So I would suggest that perhaps you do some more worksheets, wake-up sheets around the loss of a baby, so that, and when you're finished with that pain, once you've transmuted that pain, you will be able to go back and experience. Of course, it won't be that you won't remember that there was a baby involved in your life. It won't be that you'll forget that you lost that child and that there was pain. But the pain itself will dissipate when you get to the level of
when you think about it, like when you go back and think about it, what do you experience then if it's completely healed?
I'll share with you that about 2 years ago, my mom passed. And now, when I think about the fact of my mom passing, I fortunately had a week with her before she left where, I was able to convince the doctors to take her off all of the drugs that they were giving her to keep her knocked out so they could control her in a retirement or a care facility. When people become too much trouble, just give them a pill and hey, they won't be trouble anymore. And I tried over a period of 10 years to stop. I actually lost my mother 10 years earlier to their drugs, and on 2 occasions attempted to get them to stop, but they wouldn't. The second time around, which was a week before she passed, they did stop those drugs, and so I got to have a week with her where we were able to, instead of being her father or her brother or her son or her husband, she knew who I was, and we were able to converse about my childhood and things that had happened and laugh and have fun, and it was a really sweet time. And now that she's passed, I can think of her and having passed, and each time I do, what is true for me is it's just, hey, Mom, how you doing? I hope things are going well where you are. I cherish you, and I have such deep appreciation for what you've given me. Instead of pain of loss of Mom. And I would offer that I don't know what, when you work through the last worksheet involved in the loss of that child, it's going to look like, but it may well look like the child explaining to you, I only needed to be in the world for 6 months to complete what my project was then, and I was ready to go on, so I came and I left, and I'm here to support your healing, your pain. I don't know what it's going to look like for you or for that child, but I do know that if you bring the active presence of love to every iota of pain that you carry, that when you go back and remember the event that seems to be the cause of the pain, if you've worked through the pain, then the pain will be gone. The event will be there, the memory of the event will be there, the pain will not be.
I think there's a difference, though, for someone to die in the beginning of their life than at the end of their life.
Well, but that's a story we can tell ourselves to justify it. But we're not talking about someone dying. We're talking about someone who's in pain and the healing of that pain. And what Yeshua gave was a tool to literally put an end to all pain and suffering. And that's my experience of what forgiveness does. And I've worked with thousands of people over the years who've had humongous traumas around many different events. And they're able to approach those events today without pain or trauma. So I'm just inviting you, and maybe you could report back to us. Maybe do a few more worksheets around that loss, and see what you go through, see what comes up, and maybe some other layers.
I did a lot of worksheets around it. And one of the things that I became really aware of is that she came to sing. And when I was singing with her in my belly, I never sang better. It was the most exquisite music that the two of us made together. So that is exactly what it was, that it was a soul that wanted to just, come and sing a little more. So
perhaps some worksheets.
What?
Perhaps some wake-up sheets. Perhaps some wake-up sheets where the goal is the loss, to cancel the need for the future that you had imagined with her, being able to sing, the joy, the aliveness that came with it. Perhaps they'd be the goals that will put an end and complete this cycle of pain, so that the only thing left is the joy and the aliveness of her time spent with you.
Yeah. What's occurring to me right now is that not only that I was deprived of the joy of being her mother. Yeah. And I never really thought about that before.
Yeah. And so notice as soon as you go there, that's when the next layer comes up that you get to work through.
Yeah. Yeah, her father and I really wanted children. Yeah. So I guess that's what the pain really is, because it's coming up right now.
Yeah. So we hold the space, and if you're ready and you want the support right now, maybe just cancel your need to have a future with her that's joyous and singing, and just breathe into that and see what surfaces.
No, what did you just say? I didn't have a need. I'm just telling you that I discovered in doing the work, in releasing her death, that's what she came for, and that was fine with me. It was delightful. But what I'm saying now is I'm looking at what I missed out
right.
in my
a
lifetime.
Future loss.
Yeah,
Yes.
of being able to be a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's
where by canceling the need to be a mother, you get to go into your file of mother where you've stored some pain about that loss and be able to process through it and be free of it, which will liberate you and will liberate her on another level.
Right.
I remember having a woman at Heartland back several years ago, and she had been from a family that believed in multiple marriages and had a father that was extreme in the way of abuse. And he had passed some 20 or 25 years earlier before this particular intensive that she was in, and she ended up getting a mind shifter about her relationship with her dad. And as she was writing, her hand was taken over by her father, and her father wrote to her that he was earthbound because of her hate for him, that he was locked in, and begged her, please, and he used, of course, the cultural term of forgiveness, please forgive me for what I've done because I need to move on. And it was a powerful, powerful healing process for her to be able to cancel the goals around that and let him go, let him free. So the energetic link tends to tie and lock people into something they're not designed to be locked into. And so it just might be a little more work.
I think I've mentioned this before. When 3 years after my father died, when he came to me when I was on board the cruise ship in Indonesia and said goodbye, he said, I'm going to a different part of the universe. You know, I think I mentioned that before. There's one more thing I wanted to say today, which is that I'm very thrilled that you've set aside a period of time to work on a book. And what comes to me is that your intros on this radio program, day after day after day, would be a tremendous resource for creating an awesome book. I love the fact that when you're in conversational mode, you speak, you know, the words are so spontaneous and they come easily and normally. So I think just transcribing, you know, going through some of those things, the first 15 minutes, you know, your intros, I mean, that could be an amazing book. I would love to read that book.
It could be. Well, maybe how are you at transcribing?
Well,
you know,
I'm not very good on the computer. I avoid the computer as much as possible. But, yeah, I'm sorry. But, yeah, I had that thought myself, too, because I know I would enjoy the process. And maybe I'll just check it out and see. But,
you'll be keep learning in it, I promise.
You have addressed so many different topics in your intros in the 6 months that I've been listening to the program that I think it would be a very rich experience. The book could be very rich.
I think
what
you're right.
Is your plan?
Right.
Had you thought about this?
You know, I've got so many tapes. I have thousands of hours. Actually, something that I just came across recently, and I was going to look for someone who might volunteer. We had someone who mentioned the Course in Miracles back before them. We're going to look for someone who might volunteer. We had someone who mentioned the Course in Miracles